Hey guys, welcome to this week's FAQ and Freebie Friday. Now really quick, if you're new to our YouTube channel, these videos are all about answering your health related questions. So if you have a question concerning your health in general, something regarding diet, nutrition, herbalism, supplements, really anything pertaining to health and wellness, and you would like our help in answering your questions, all you have to do is leave those questions in the comment section below, and we'll be selecting those questions to answer based on popularity, the questions that we feel will be most beneficial to the whole group, and of course the questions that we are capable of answering. Now something else really great about these videos is that every week from that comment section, we select one lucky person to win a free bag of tonic herbs or medicinal mushrooms. So even if you don't have a question for us this week, but you're interested in winning some free herbs, all you have to do to be entered to win is simply subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't yet already. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up, then just drop a comment in the comment section below. And with all that being said, let's get to this week's questions. Alright, so taking a look at our first question, this question reads, is there anything one can do for receding gums and what causes them? Many thanks. So to answer your question, yes, there is something you can do about receding gums. You can correct the issue and reverse and regenerate the gum tissue. I've done it myself, I've seen other people do it, and I'll share with you in a moment exactly how I did that. But first, answering the second part of your question, what causes receding gums? Well, if we take a look at what generally is responsible for tissue regeneration, this is primarily a job of the thyroid. So the thyroid gland is the master gland for regulating all of the metabolism, but it has very specific and direct effects on the metabolism of our bones and teeth. It's going to affect the various tissues in the body, particularly the skin and the hair. And since the gums are ultimately skin tissue or some sort of tissue that is comprised of collagen, since the thyroid ultimately regulates collagen synthesis and the regeneration of all of the tissues in the body, a lot of the times receding gum lines can be a symptom of chronic or long-term hypothyroidism. And really, whether you're talking about growing healthy and strong bones, growing healthy and strong hair, or tissue and skin renewal for, again, young, healthy skin that is not weak, brittle, and thin, all of these things are highly dependent on being in a relaxed, non-stressed, or non-catabolistic state, and instead being in a more anabolistic, high-energy state. So really that's all aging is. I think if you look at receding gums, this is just a microcosm or a small example of what can happen to the body when you are in a more catabolistic, breaking down stress state than you are in an anabolistic, high energy state. So it's really quite simple what causes receding gum lines, tissue generation, and the degeneration of the body as a whole, and what to do about it. Again, this just comes back to being in a more catabolistic phase than you are in a relaxed, anabolistic, high energy state. So really, the only challenge is finding the various stressors that are keeping you in this more catabolistic stress state that's interfering with proper tissue renewal and collagen synthesis, and making sure, again, that you can invert this ratio. Again, any sort of aging or disease in the body just comes back to an inverted ratio of catabolism to anabolism. Ideally, you'd probably want a more 80-20 ratio of a high energy thyroid driven anabolistic state of metabolism or rate of metabolism compared to the catabolistic breaking down phase. And I say this because you can't avoid stress altogether. You're going to run into some sort of stress no matter what, I'd imagine. So it's really more about an optimal ratio. Again, staying in a more anabolistic, high energy state where your body's secreting much more adaptive youth hormones like testosterone, DHEA, pregnenolone, progesterone, DHT, and all of the androgen sex steroids that tend to increase your resilience to stress, promote a high amount of energy being produced in the cells in the body, promoting healthy circulation, relaxing the body, producing lots of carbon dioxide. So that way, again, you're biologically relaxed and producing a lot more energy than your body's using. So you want to stay in this state more. You want a higher ratio of the protective hormones than you do to the catabolistic hormones like adrenaline and cortisol and aldosterone, a lot of the stress hormones we talk about on the channel, and staying in this optimal ratio or balance more often than you are not. So in general, what causes receding gums is what causes any sort of tissue degeneration or skin degeneration. So it wouldn't be surprising to find out that that people with receding gum lines are also running into accelerated skin aging, and their body is showing a lot of signs of wasting or catabolism. And as I've mentioned so many times in these videos, it's really the catabolistic stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, aldosterone, which tend to break down the various tissues in the body, interfere with normal collagen synthesis, causing abnormal collagen synthesis, where instead of regenerating the skin tissue, there's scar tissue being formed, and then the various unimportant tissues are sort of wasting away. And also, from my understanding of the pathology of receding gum lines, other than the low thyroid state and the high stress state and the catabolistic effect that these stress hormones can have on the gum tissue, basically causing them to break down at a rate faster than they're regenerating, could be a correlation between thyroid function and immune function. So typically, when thyroid is low, also the digestive system, detoxification, and immune systems also start to downregulate. So if your body, for example, in a low thyroid state is not efficiently producing various immune cells, then this can lead the gums open to infectious bacteria that could be causing inflammation and contributing to receding gum lines in that way. So that's another way of saying that also the low thyroid, high stress hormone state could be interfering with normal immune function, which could be further contributing to the receding gums. Now, really quick, before I get into some tips for reversing the receding gums, I want to share with you my personal story and experience with receding gum line and its correlation to everything I'm talking about already, and give you some insight as to how the possible hypothyroid state and high stress state could be a contributing factor, if not the major contributing factor. So it was about 4 or 5 years ago, I experimented with a very hardcore ketogenic diet. I ate little to no carbohydrates. Some days I wouldn't eat any carbohydrates whatsoever. So what happened one day, it was about 2 years in, all of a sudden, 1 or 2 teeth, like right in the front on my bottom row of teeth, all of a sudden it started receding rapidly. It's like overnight, all of a sudden my gum line just like shot down an uncomfortable amount, down almost to the very bottom of the teeth. I thought I was gonna have to like lose my teeth altogether. It was a crazy amount of recession. Again, what felt like happened overnight. And corresponding with that was starting to run into hair issues. I started noticing like my hair was getting really brittle and really dry and falling out. And that's when I realized that something I was doing with the diet wasn't right. So what I did, fortunately I was able to correct it actually in a very small period of time. I thought again I was gonna have to like lose my teeth because of how bad it went down. What I did was, the first thing was I intuitively just started to eat more fruit sugar. And that instantly warmed me up, felt a lot better, and I noticed it stopped the bleeding. The other thing I started to do was more vigorously oil pull. So I was oil pulling already, but I oil pulled twice a day, and I started to add in various essential oils that had things like cinnamon, clove oil, and other natural antibacterial oils, which probably handled any sort of bacterial inflammation that was occurring. And then the other thing I did was I was brushing with an activated charcoal, of course very gently because of the inflammation around the gum. And just doing these few things, incorporating a high amount of fruit-based carbohydrates, getting out of ketosis in other words, and then oil pulling frequency with added cinnamon, clove, and other essential oils like peppermint, and then doing a very light activated charcoal brush. Within about 5 days, it completely stopped the receding, and it actually slowly crept back up to a normal line. So it took a longer time for it to fully regenerate to like the normal height, but it reversed significantly, about 75%, because it got actually really low. So this for me helped understand the correlation between what I was doing in this very low carb ketogenic diet and the correlation between the various hormones in your body and things like tissue generation in the mouth. So what I found basically is that over time, as I've shared many times in these videos, is that when you're in a state of ketosis, which is usually preceded by lipolysis, your body has to deplete all of its sugar reserves, which stimulate the pituitary adrenal system to secrete adrenaline. And in order to use that fat for fuel, you have to be secreting adrenaline in the body to liberate the fat from the tissue. And it's a combination of cortisol and adrenaline that keep you in this high rate of lipolysis, freeing up fat from the body to be used as alternative substrates. So over time, although you feel really good and there's some beneficial aspects to using a ketone for energy, the problem is that staying in a high rate of lipolysis and ketosis is dependent on the production of stress hormones, which over time will slow the immune system, weaken and atrophy the thymus gland, and in this case start to degenerate your skin tissue and gum tissue. So I noticed a lot of these effects right around the time I was doing this hardcore ketogenic diet, about 2 years in. So I probably reached my peak of seeing the benefits of it, and then I started to see all the degenerative effects of it. And again, it makes perfect sense when you start to understand the various effects that these hormones produced under ketosis can have on things like your skin tissue, your scalp tissue. So with that being said, the things I'm going to recommend that you do to reverse it is you can try to replicate the things I did anecdotally. You can start to oil pull. There's studies on oil pulling and its effects on oral health. I'll link some of those studies beneath this video that you can see here. And it's very, very effective for getting rid of the bacteria. The caprylic acid in coconut oil is very strong antimicrobial, and that can help with any inflammatory bacteria in the mouth. And again, it can at least sort of stop it anecdotally. It's like a short-term remedy. But the thing you're going to want to do over the long term is correct any sort of thyroid deficiencies and high stress states. I've experienced it myself, and also talking to a lot of people that a lot of the times their receding gums they notice is triggered by stress. So it's likely that you're experiencing some sort of stress. What's interesting is my story. It was the least stressed I'd ever been really in my life, emotionally and mentally. But I ironically put myself through one of the intense or more intense physiological stressors I could have ever put myself in. And even though I was relaxed mentally, I was stressing my body out nutritionally. So that just goes to show you that it's very important to look at stress from all angles. You want to make sure that you're not stressed psychologically, of course. So getting a handle on that stress is going to be imperative, but also that you're not stressing your body nutritionally, basically by starving it to any degree. A hypocaloric or low-calorie diet and a diet that's deficient in either protein or carbohydrates, the right types of carbs, can put your body into the state of stress metabolism. So simple things you're going to want to do is if you're on a low-carb, low-calorie diet, is get off that immediately. The simple way I usually explain this to people, although there's tons of people promoting fasting, low-calorie diets, low-carb, no sugar, is consider a newborn child, which has one of the most robust metabolisms you'll ever see in a living organism. If you just touch a baby, they're just putting off heat, they're radiating heat, their metabolism's so high, they're in such a regenerative state. They come out of the womb or out of the birth canal, and even after enduring the stress of pregnancy, their metabolism is so high, they start regenerating and growing full heads of hair and start developing skin and growing bones and organs. Basically, they're just in an incredibly high energy state, a very anabolistic growth state. And if you consider what a baby does when they're first born, they're doing two primary things that I notice. They're resting a lot. They're very relaxed and calm. They're very warm, so they have a high metabolism. And they're feeding constantly. So in terms of diet and lifestyle, I think looking at the lifestyle, as best as you can, try to be as chilled out or relaxed as a newborn baby, which is obviously easier said than done, but it just gives you an idea of the state you want to be in. You want to be in a calm and relaxed state for good health and for growing back the gum tissue, of course. But dietarily wise, you want to make sure that you're eating pretty frequently. Never skip a meal, never get to the point where your blood sugar drops, don't starve yourself. All of these things are awful stressors to the body. If you look at a baby, it's feeding almost constantly. Of course, it's in a very high anabolic, high energy state, but if you can replicate that to some degree or another, you're going to help also keep your metabolism at a high rate. Now, with those things in mind, also consider the fact that if you're increasing the metabolic rate, you're going to want to increase your nutrition. So don't just eat more high quality foods. Things I'd recommend is ensuring you're getting most of your carbohydrates from fruit. I'd recommend about 300 carbs a day from, again, organic ripe fruit. The sugar in fruit is not very insulinogenic. There's other added minerals, vitamins, and polyphenols that also help to synergize with the fruit sugar, helping you metabolize it more efficiently. And the polyphenols, I think, have some sort of antibacterial effects as well. So getting in high quality carbs from fruit is a good idea. I'd also recommend making sure that the calcium to phosphorus ratio in your body is about 2 to 1, getting at least more calcium than you are phosphorus. This is important because when the ratio is inverted, this can activate the parathyroid and turn down thyroid function. And there's a very strong correlation between bone health and skin health. So oftentimes if there's any issues or degeneration occurring with your tissue, you can guarantee that there's probably a similar effect occurring within the bone. So a lot of the things that support healthy bone metabolism will also help to support the metabolism and regeneration of the skin. So I think also getting adequate sunlight, adequate vitamin D3, all of your fat-soluble vitamins, and eating in a way that supports good thyroid function. So I can't talk about everything, otherwise this video would be too long. So I'm going to recommend that you grab one of our online courses to teach you how to eat in a way that is supportive of good thyroid function, good metabolic function, and that will help you decrease any sort of metabolic stress. So to quickly summarize, if you want to regenerate any tissue in your body, gums included, you want to make sure that you're in a higher anabolistic, high energy regenerative state than you are in a catabolistic stress state. So that means keeping thyroid function good, avoiding stress, minimizing stress, and promoting the overall production of energy in your body. The other thing that you could try is increasing your frequency of oil pulling. If you're not oil pulling, just get some coconut oil, add in some clove and cinnamon oil, and swish that around your mouth for 10 minutes and spit it out. Maybe do that twice a day. That could be very beneficial and soothe the inflammation and get rid of the bacteria in the mouth. You also want to make sure you're not brushing your teeth too hard. I'd recommend actually getting a water pick and a soft bristle brush, so that way you're not doing too much damage or irritation to the gum line itself, especially if they're receding now. And then the overall goal, the big goal, is to optimize thyroid function to ensure a high energy state that's going to be supportive of tissue renewal and regeneration, proper collagen synthesis, so the skin tissue is regenerating properly, and also that you're increasing your circulation so you can drive blood and nutrients to the gum tissue to regenerate. And again, for getting dietary, lifestyle, and supplement tips for promoting the health of the thyroid and ensuring proper metabolic function, I would recommend grabbing one of our online courses, ideally the Healthy Weight Loss course, which will give you a good foundational diet, supplements that are going to be very beneficial, and lifestyle advice for, again, supporting the overall functioning of the metabolism and decreasing any sort of stress. Okay, moving along, getting to our second question. This one reads, if my heartbeat is 72 beats per minute, is that considered too low? So that's a really good question. I talk a lot about on the YouTube channel how you can use things like your basal body temperature and your resting heart rate to measure the functioning of your thyroid and the rate of metabolism. And generally speaking, the lower these numbers are, both the body temperature and heart rate, the more likely that your thyroid is working suboptimally, it's sluggish, and the metabolism overall or metabolic rate is low. So at least according to Brodo Barnes' book on thyroid function, the range that you want to fall into on a pretty regular basis or on a consistent basis would be between 77 and 88 beats per minute. So you're not technically in range, but you're not too far from the bottom of the range. I would generally recommend seeking to be more in the mid 80s on a pretty regular, consistent basis, which can be more difficult to do depending on the various stressors that are impacting your heart rate and your metabolic rate. But I've seen people with much lower numbers than 72. Now keep in mind, there's a lot of controversy around these numbers and this whole topic. From my understanding, most Western medicine doctors are going to tell you that have a lower resting heart rate. This is better. This shows that you're not really stressed out and that you are going to be less likely to experience a heart attack, stroke, and cardiovascular disease. However, I think something that's really important to understand, not getting to the whole Cold War on physiology, whether a high rate of metabolism or a low rate of metabolism is more beneficial than the other. But something that's really important to understand and to discern between is having a high heart rate because of stress and a high heart rate because of good thyroid function, having a high functioning metabolism. So what's really tricky is that a lot of times, and probably why Western medicine doctors tell you to have a lower heart rate, is because a lot of the stress substances, like adrenaline, for example, can increase your heart rate. So sometimes a high heart rate is indicative of an underlying stress. Anybody that's been really stressed out before probably notices in the moment their heart rate goes up. But again, that's because of the secretion of stress hormones. So this can be a very difficult thing to determine, which is why I think it's important to measure your heart rate over a long, consistent basis, and also ideally probably first thing in the morning, before and after breakfast, to ensure that there's no stressor that is affecting your heart rate. When you first wake up, most people are going to be in a more relaxed state. They're generally chilled out. They're not really experiencing any stressors from traffic or work or relationships yet. So putting yourself in the right environment to measure these things could be very helpful and help to avoid some of the possible stressful influences that are increasing your heart rate. And this is important because it's ultimately good thyroid function that increases the heart rate, increases the body temperature. But what can happen over time is that these stress hormones, they sort of have a rebound effect. They'll increase the heart rate for a short period of time. Let's say you're stressed out because you went running a very long distance. Your heart rate might be really high during that exercise, but then you'll find that a couple hours after the exercise, your heart rate's really, really low. And this is because these stress hormones and stress can actually induce or inflict hypothyroid. So the various stress hormones that will increase your heart rate temporarily, they will also deactivate or inactivate the thyroid hormone, causing a hypothyroid state. So it's very important to make the discernment between a high heart rate that's induced by good thyroid function and a high heart rate that is being triggered by stress or chronic adrenaline and cortisol production. So I think the simple way to really figure that out, again, is to measure it every single day, ideally first thing in the morning, where there's no potential stressor or stressful influences. If you really want to get into it, you could obviously measure things like cortisol, adrenaline levels. You can measure your T3 and your reverse T3. And if you have pretty high cortisol levels and low T3 and high reverse T3, you know then that your higher heart rate is being stimulated by stress and not good thyroid function. But generally speaking, I would not be too alarmed by this number. I would just try again to get it between 77 and 88. My heart rate is usually around 85 beats per minute pretty regularly. If I take coffee with some various supplements like some vitamin E or something, I notice that can drive it up to about 90 beats per minute. And something else I think that's really helpful to pay attention to is your hands and feet. Sometimes your heart rate can be high, but you're still cold in the extremities. I've noticed that over the last 2 years, since I've been implicating a lot of the stuff I share with you guys, that I'm warm all the time, everywhere. Like my scalp radiates heat, my hands and feet are always putting off warmth, and that my heart rate and body temperature are generally high or in the upper ranges. However, in the past, I noticed that my heart rate would actually be pretty high on a ketogenic diet, but I was always cold. My hands and feet were always cold. I was pretty much always wearing multiple layers because I was just intolerant to the cold, but I would actually profusely sweat, especially when I would drink coffee on an empty stomach, and my heart rate would get really fast despite being otherwise cold internally, and then also showing a lot of symptoms of hypothyroidism in the skin, hair, and then also sweating and things like that. So hopefully that answers your question. I wouldn't be too alarmed about these numbers. Again, I would just try to measure the heart rate pretty consistently. Try to do it every day for a month to really find out where your numbers are naturally and more regularly that are not influenced by some sort of, short-term or acute stress. Do it first thing in the morning and after eating, alongside also taking your body temperature. And if you really want to figure out what's going on, you could do a little blood work. I would check for, again, your cortisol levels, your T3 and reverse T3. These things could probably tell you alone whether or not your heart rate is high because of stress or just good thyroid function. And I would obviously just try to strive to increase the metabolic rate slowly over time. Remember, as you increase your metabolic rate, as your heart rate goes up, as your body temperature increases, you'll also want to increase the density of your nutrition. So making sure you're getting adequate nutrients, vitamins, minerals, a lot of the building blocks for good thyroid function. Otherwise, if you're increasing your heart rate and not also increasing your nutrition, you could run into deficiencies. All right, guys, that's it for today's FAQ and Freebie Friday. I'm gonna end this video here before it gets too long. Now remember, if you're interested in winning some free herbs or mushrooms, all you have to do to be entered to win is give this video a thumbs up, especially if you've enjoyed it today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't yet already, and then just drop a comment or question in the comment section below. Now, for those of you whose questions I answered, or anybody else interested in additional information and resources, remember, we do have a blog, an online tonic herb shop, and an online wellness academy, which contain tons of valuable information and resources for improving your health beyond just these YouTube videos. So for learning more, be sure to check out all of those resources, which you can find in the description box below.